I was in the mountains of North Carolina for several days. It was a beautiful and peaceful hiking trip with my brother, sister, and their friend Caleb. Until one early morning around 3 a.m., when every creature in a 10-mile radius was chirping, squeaking, howling, or scampering around through the woods. Being from the Midwest and having survived 2 tornadoes, I thought the worst weather event of my life was about to occur, and I was sleeping in a hammock. For those of you who don't know, just before a tornado is formed above your head, every animal in sight will be freaking the fuck out. They know. They can feel it. You can feel it too. You just won't know what that new feeling is until the 60-year-old trees beside you are being ripped from the ground. Being in the eye of a tornado is even more strange, as all those same animals in sight are frozen. Sure, they still exist, but their little soul is on hold, and they don't do much more than look around quietly. It's fucking creepy. Anyway, this wasn't a tornado. 3 a.m., the fire we made was just embers, and the roaring thunder of animals freaking out. I peek my head out of my hammock, imagining getting my face smashed in by the first softball-sized hail, with my luck just for looking. But no, there was no bad weather. There was no storm or looming catastrophe. It was a beautiful night. Aside from the roaring animal kingdom, my brother peeked his head out of the hammock above me and looked down to see if I was awake. When he saw my eyes as wide as saucers, he whispered, "What the fuck is happening?" I replied, "I don't know, but I wish I was up there in your hammock." Being on the ground level usually is best for guys my size, about 235 pounds. I lack the grace to climb up hammock ropes and jump into bed 8 feet off the ground. Anyway, the terrifyingly creepy roaring continued for about 30 seconds, and then it just suddenly stopped. It seemed to be a sweeping effect, where the outside of the radius stopped first, and the creatures closer to us stopped last, but it was only a single second or two difference. It was pretty damn synchronized. My brother and I were freaked the fuck out. After 5 minutes of silence, we got out of the hammocks and started the fire up again. This time we made sure it was big enough to light up 100 feet out. The last thing we need is a Bigfoot or some weird shit going down. My brother went up to the ridge to check on my sister and Caleb, about 60 feet uphill from our hammocks. Caleb always wanted to be in the highest possible safe spot so he could watch the sunrise from his hammock. As soon as my brother got to their hammocks, he yelled a shrieking kind of yell for me, the kind I had only heard from him twice before, when his friend had got his bike handlebar lodged into his stomach about an inch deep as a kid, and when he split his own head open. I ran up to the ridge with the axe in my right hand, the first aid bag in my left hand, and flashlight in my teeth, expecting the worst. When I arrived to Caleb's bottom bunk, he was in a state of shock. His eyes were wide open, he was shivering and shaking, and he was staring down at the valley. Wouldn't you know, my sister didn't even wake up. Fucking figures. She had her headphones in all night, listening to her folk music. Apparently she hates the sound of animals and prefers to have a controlled mental state where nothing can make her paranoid. We woke her up and she had no idea what the hell was going on. She just stayed in her hammock like, "What do you want me to do?" We eventually got Caleb down to the fire and wrapped him up in some blankets. I gave him a shot of whiskey to sip on, but he mostly just held it and stared into the fire. The whole night was too fucking weird for sleep, but Caleb finally lay down next to the fire and fell asleep around 4:45 a.m. The sun came up and my siblings and I decided to leave the fire and go see the sunrise from the ridge. We all sat in Caleb's hammock, still bewildered. The sun was perfect, and Caleb picked out the best spot you could imagine, as usual. But then my brother spotted something strange. "What's that?" he said, pointing down the valley. "Right there on the bank of the river." My sister and I struggled to get his perspective, but then finally noticed a clearing. We decided to go check it out, but one of us had to stay with Caleb. My sister volunteered, as she hates creepy things. She didn't want us to go down, but we insisted. I left my axe an emergency GPS signal thing. I told her to just scream if she needed us, and not to hesitate to use her pepper spray. She just said, "Stop freaking me out and just go. I'll be here when you get back." So my brother and I hiked down to the river. It took about 20 minutes. When we arrived, we felt very uncomfortable. There were no animals around whatsoever. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. The clearing on the riverbank was about 100 yards upstream. We took to the higher side of the bank to keep our distance. I don't think either of us actually expected anything to go down, but we wanted to remain cautious. When we were about 50 yards away, at a slight elevation to the clearing, we pulled out our phones to take pictures, but our phones were dead. Mine is known to die, but I have an external battery pack that attaches to my OtterBox that I know was fully charged. My brother's phone is always reliable and usually attached to his portable solar panel charger that he keeps on the outside of his pack. His shit was dead too. Both of us tried to hold our power buttons, not believing they were really dead, but when we realized they were definitely not going to turn on, we both got that paranoid look on our faces. We decided to leave, but not before carefully studying the clearing for a few seconds. It was about 100 feet across and the shape of a triangle. All of the bushes and plants that typically grow alongside the river were all flattened down. Even some mature azalea bushes that typically stand 6 to 8 feet tall were eerily lying flat. It's as if everything in that triangle shape had bent down as close to the ground as it could get. Nothing appeared broken, but rather as if it had grown along the earth instead of growing up toward the sun. It was weird shit, and only in that triangle area. When we got back to camp, Caleb was awake. My sister had a weird look on her face. Caleb was totally normal. "Hey bro, are you alright?" my brother asked. Caleb just casually answered, "Yeah man, doing well. Missed the sunrise, but I guess I needed the sleep." We just looked at him concerned, like, what the fuck? He was eating a breakfast bar and heating up coffee over the fire. We sat down across from him and I asked, "So hey, do you remember that shit last night?" He looked at me puzzled. My brother added, "You know, when all the animals freaked out and we found you." He just looked so confused. My sister said, "Caleb, stop playing." He asked, "What are you talking about?" "Bro, you were fucked up last night." Caleb laughed and responded, "Yeah, I figured I had to be because I never sleep next to the fire all wrapped up in blankets, not after getting that bug in my ear that one time." We continued to ask him questions, but he had no memory whatsoever. As far as he was concerned, he had a few too many drinks and slept next to the fire. We told him our story, and each of us agreed, but he had no recollection. We told him about the spot next to the river, and how our phones wouldn't turn on. We pulled our phones out to show him, and they were already on. My brother had 67% battery, and mine had 41%. We got the creeps real quick. We decided to pack up camp and get the fuck away from that spot. But before we did a final sweep, Caleb asked, "Have you guys seen my camera?" He had a nice DSLR Sony with a nice lens, and that shit was gone. The weirdest part is he slept with it in his hammock every single time he goes camping, and we've never seen it not on his body. He even specifically remembered taking it to bed and tucking it into his bag and putting the lens in its sleeve. It's like a ritual for him. He takes super good care of his belongings. We searched around the ridge and all around the fire and in between the two spots. It was nowhere to be found. Caleb even went down the ridge a bit toward the river, in case it had fallen out and rolled down the hill, but it was fucking gone. We had to leave, and my siblings and I agreed to pitch in to buy him a new one if he would just get the fuck out of there with us. About 3 miles and 1 hour later, my brothers turned to me on the trail and said, "Do you think he tried to take a picture of some shit he wasn't supposed to see?" The creepiest feeling swept over me and I replied, "Bro, let's just forget how fucked up he was and get the hell away from here." He nodded in agreement. It's been about a year now, and they haven't seen or heard from Caleb in 8 months. No one has. I was going down to the pool with some friends one day. Once we were there, we played games like Marco Polo and Submarine. When it had gotten dark, we headed to my friend's house. On our way there was a man walking on the sidewalk. There was nothing suspicious about this guy, but once we arrived at our destination, my friend said that his parents aren't home, but they'll be coming soon. I walked into the games room and looked outside the window, and strangely enough, the guy from earlier was out there. I thought nothing of it and thought maybe he was just taking a walk around the neighborhood. About an hour later, I saw him again, and again, and again. The man kept walking past the window. The next time I saw him, I told my friends. They looked at me like I was this big baby and started laughing at me. The guy, again, walked past the window, but this time with a great big smile on his face. My friends had finally stopped laughing at this point. We watched the man walk up and down the street, his smile getting bigger and bigger until he stopped right in front of the window. He turned and then walked to the front door. He rang the doorbell. "Fuck," I said. We didn't have phones. He kept ringing the doorbell. I saw him pull out a pistol and then waved it at us. Bang! The window where we were standing at had a bullet being fired at it, missing my friend by an inch. We all ducked as he started firing at the door lock, allowing him to get in. We were petrified. We hid under a large sofa and waited. 1 minute felt like an hour. We could hear footsteps going upstairs. When he reached the window where we were at, a police car arrived. 2 officers ran into the house and caught the man. He said that he was trying to kill us. He also said that when he got out of jail, he was going to try to kill us all, and he will succeed. This is another tale from my time installing satellite internet. I honestly believe my anxiety issues stem from the 8 years I spent doing this job. Not many customers were pleasant to deal with, but most were tolerable. Don't get me wrong, I have met some incredible people, but truthfully, the bad outweighs the good. This particular job was a system upgrade. This entails, at the very basic, changing out some parts on the satellite and switching out the modem inside, bringing the customer up to date with the fastest internet the company offered at the time. Let's call this customer Greg. Greg was retired from the military, having fought in Vietnam. He walked around shirtless, showing off somewhere around 7 to 10 faded dragons. He told me that each dragon represented a fellow comrade who lost their life in Vietnam. He talked a lot, actually lamenting about how he was all alone and that his children didn't want to have anything to do with him. I felt kind of bad for the guy, but it wasn't until later that I think I understood why they were out of the picture. Inside, I spent most of the time running speed tests that were documented on the company's page and filling out paperwork. Greg had a little chihuahua that kept coming up to say hello to me. I didn't mind because the dog was sweet and just wanted me to pet it. "Get away from him," Greg yelled to the dog. Moments later, the dog came back to me, sending Greg into an unnecessary rage. I told Greg that it was okay. "No! Hell no! It's not okay. I told him to get away." Greg yanked the dog off the floor and proceeded to beat the shit out of it. I'm not talking like a spank when your dog pisses on the floor. He beat the dog, sending pain-filled yelps throughout the living room, and then threw the chihuahua away from him. I sat in silence, feeling my face grow hot from anger. There was absolutely no need in that. I waited until Greg cooled his shit before I told him everything was up and running smoothly. To test out the new system, Greg downloads an ebook from some site. It pains me to talk good about the company I worked for, but I was impressed at the speed. It took a minute for the book to download, but this wasn't good enough. "I don't like that," Greg announced. "You sure you did everything right?" A little offended, I assured him that the dish signal was maxed out and that his internet was working as good as it ever would. Greg started to get angry. "I want to talk to your people right now." "Okay, no problem." I gave him the number of the company I contracted from, and he called them. "Hey, yeah, I've got your man here at my house. He ain't going nowhere until I get what I paid for." There was a pause. "Right, well, I'm not letting him go anywhere." He handed the phone to me, and I explained to the lady that everything was running perfect. There was absolutely nothing else I could do. The issue now was between Greg and the corporation, not me. My job was finished. The lady, we'll call Kim, knew everything was good but told me to get him to sign the paperwork so I could get to my next appointment. I tried to get Greg to sign, but he wasn't, in his words, signing a goddamn thing until I fixed his internet. There was an awkward silence as he just glared at me from the computer chair. I guess expecting me to wiggle my nose and make him happy. I don't know. Hell, to this day I'm still confused as to what his problem was. My cell phone rang. It was Kim, calling from the office. "Hey, are you still there?" she asked. "Yeah." "Is he close by?" I looked up to him, sitting there in his fury. "Yeah." "Okay, well, just tell him you're going to check something outside. Get in your truck and get the hell out of there." There was a sense of urgency in her voice that made me uncomfortable. After the call ended, I told Greg I was going to check the satellite dish and that I would be right back. I walked out of the front door hoping he wouldn't follow me. Thankfully, he didn't. I got in my truck and hesitated. I knew as soon as he heard my truck crank that he would come bolting out the door, probably with a gun. This might sound a little silly, but if you could have seen his face, the thought of him shooting me isn't far-fetched. Quickly I cranked the truck and slammed into reverse. I can still remember the song, "You're Going Down" by Sick Puppies playing through the speakers as I made my adrenaline-fueled escape. About 5 minutes down the road, I get a phone call. It was Greg. I didn't answer it. A minute later, my phone gave me a notification that I had a voicemail. The thought of that message still gives me chills. Greg's voice was eerily somber, like a kid who didn't get what they wanted for Christmas, completely out of character. "Hey, I just came outside to tell you goodbye and I saw that you'd already left. You didn't say bye, kiss my ass, or nothing. You were just gone. I don't know what they told you. Just go, get the hell out of there. I just thought it was..." His voice changed from sad to angry as he growled the last word. Real sneaky. I'm sure being a veteran had a lot to do with his mental issues. Maybe he had PTSD, I don't know. Regardless, seeing how he beat the shit out of his dog, and the way he was going to hold me captive until he was happy, makes me thankful that the days of being a satellite internet technician are over. Update. I apologize for not including this bit of information in the original entry. Many of you have shown concern for the Chihuahua, and have been quite harsh in my not intervening while Greg was being abusive. Let me first say that he was reported. After listening to the voice message, I found a gas station and parked, got a grip and made a phone call. I filed a report on Greg and told them how abusive and unstable he was. I gave them the guy's name and address. They said they would look into it. Yes, I could have intervened, but I didn't. I'm not a psychologist, so had I done something, I can't predict how Greg may have reacted. I have 2 children and a wife who depend solely on me, and I'm no good to them if I'm dead or unable to work. I have called people out on animal abuse before. I had one customer haul off his dog outside and kick it for no reason. My response was, "Please don't do that." Normal people get pissed when you call them out, but even if they are angry, their eyes still have guilt in them. Someone who is mentally unstable, however, I'm not prepared to confront. I hope that if you find yourself in the same situation, that reading my experience will prepare you for how to handle it. It's easy to say, "Well, I would have done this," or "Why didn't you do that?" When life throws in these surreal situations, you don't know what you will do until you're stuck in the middle of it. I've always been afraid of the dark. More than that, I've always been afraid of the curtains being open at night. The big black void of the backyard from the kitchen window is unnerving, so I make it a point to close the curtains before nightfall. That said, the first incident happened about a week and a half ago. Now, our neighbours across the street had had a lot of company lately, so the sound of car doors and people talking and stuff like that had been a common thing the past few weeks. They'd only lived there for about 2 months, and since they moved in, lots of people came and went. However, this usually stopped when it started to get dark, at least on most nights. So when I started hearing sounds akin to doors opening and closing outside, I got a little nervous. I started thinking that maybe the neighbours were just having a random night visit from someone. Some people do. I do sometimes. So I kind of put it out of my mind. I just continued watching videos with my husband. After about an hour, he fell asleep and I kind of rested my head on his shoulder, still watching videos, until our dog, Penny, rose her head up and started growling. This dog is a master alarm. Any time she hears something outside that doesn't seem right, mostly just at people showing up unexpectedly or people talking outside or something, she will perk up and growl or bark. Whenever she does, I go on high alert, especially at night. Our other dog, Clementine, isn't so quick to be aggressive. She's still a pup, only 7 months old. She had no reaction to this except to sit up and try to play with Penny while she swerved away from her, ears and tail pointing straight up and alert. I immediately lifted myself from my husband's shoulder and got out of bed. I should note that for the past couple of weeks we've slept in the living room as we are having our bedroom and bathroom renovated. Our mattress is on the floor between the couches. Just behind us is a small hall that leads to the laundry room and one of the 2 back doors on the house. On this back door is a window with a small white curtain. I hate that door. The curtain on it is very see-through. I try my best to avoid it at night, but as it's the most readily available window, it was the one I went to check and see what Penny was barking at. When all I saw was darkness, I checked the front windows and saw nothing. After a while, Penny calmed down and took her place at the foot of the bed next to the couch. Clementine, too, took her place sleeping in front of the windows behind the couch that's in front of our bed. I put it out of my mind thinking maybe she was having a senior moment. She's 12 years old and she has had moments where she's barked at nothing. When I heard the sound of rustling just outside of the back door behind me. Outside there's a lot of tools, a workbench, and a couple of old washers we took out of the shed not long ago to try and get rid of. There's also some lawn chairs that make a very distinct sound when pushed across the concrete patio. This is the sound I heard. I know this sound because when the dogs are outside, Clementine runs into them and even drags them around a lot. So much so that I'll sometimes just stack them in the shed to avoid it. Penny immediately starts growling again and even barking a couple of times, stirring my husband. I was frozen and did not want to get up and check. So I shook my husband and told him what I'd heard. Both of us got up and checked the back door window by us, and the large picture window in the kitchen as well as the window on the back door in there. Eventually, he resorted to grabbing a crowbar from the tool closet inside and peeking out of the kitchen back door. There was nothing there. He sighed and told me it was probably just the wind blowing those chairs around. They weren't exactly heavy, just those cheap white plastic ones some people have, and it actually kind of was windy that night. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that that wasn't it. Cut to about 2 nights later. It was a Friday night and my husband had gone out with a work friend. I was alone, browsing on my laptop when all of a sudden I heard that rustling again. Only this time it wasn't just the sound of the lawn chairs on the patio. This time it sounded like someone was in the shed. The laundry room behind us connects directly to the shed, which is actually a small carport garage type room that we just store all of our excess belongings in. So any time a sound is made there, if you're in the living room you can hear it quite clearly. This time not only Penny began growling, but even Clementine, who never growls, began to follow suit. This made me nervous. I called my husband and told him I heard something in the shed, and he immediately told me he'd head home straight away and to keep the doors locked. I ran to each door, making sure they were all locked. When I passed the kitchen, I caught a glance at the picture window in the kitchen. I'd forgotten to close the curtains, so they were open, and in the darkness of the backyard, against the dim glow of the light in the alley behind the fence, I saw something move. I froze. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know how long it'd be before my husband got home, and I didn't want to go near the window to shut the curtains for fear of whoever was out there seeing me. I hid behind the corner by the kitchen, with Penny and Clementine at my legs as though guarding me, both still growling. I clutched my phone to my chest, trying to remember if the back door by the kitchen was locked or not. I ultimately decided I could easily crawl through the other opening to the kitchen without being detected, as it was out of the way of the window and led straight into the back door. I got on my hands and knees and slowly crept my way to the opening. At least from there I could clearly see the lock and maybe wouldn't have to go all the way to it at all. This was my biggest mistake, or possibly my saving grace. The front door window has a clear view of where I was, and it didn't occur to me until I heard the security doorknob jiggle. I froze and snapped my head to face the front door window. In the light of our porch light, I could clearly see someone peering in at me. If it was my husband, he would have just come in straight away. Instead, whoever it was just stared. I couldn't see their face, as the security door kind of blurs the image through the window. Either way, I could tell it wasn't my husband. I didn't think. I just dashed down the hall into our bedroom. Messy though it was, with wood, paint cans and rolled up carpet all over the place, I knew I could at least hide in the ensuite bathroom and lock the door, while also locking the bedroom door behind me. I immediately called the police, who had me stay on the line with them while they sent out an officer. My husband got home first, practically scaring the shit out of me when he knocked on the bedroom door. I came out of the bathroom and unlocked the door and threw my arms around him. Not long after, the police came, but there was no sign of anyone outside or even in the alleyway. I didn't sleep at all, neither did my husband. He just kind of laid there with the crowbar next to him. Our dogs were restless too, heads and ears constantly perked up, peering around them like they were listening for the indication of an intruder. Cut again to 2 nights ago. After the whole thing with the police, I'd had a hard time sleeping, so I've pretty much ruined my sleep schedule by staying up until my eyes could literally not handle being open anymore. That night I was watching a movie, trying to focus on a pleasant, happy film to put my mind at ease, when without warning, Penny began howling and barking viciously with her head stuck between the curtains of the windows behind the couch that's in front of the bed. My blood ran cold and I stood up to peek outside. The neighbours across the street were all standing in the yard, talking quite loud. But something didn't seem right. They all seemed to be looking in my direction, and Penny was not letting up. She was barking so viciously I almost didn't recognize her. I'd never seen her so worked up. I couldn't get her to stop no matter what I did, so I eventually just pulled her from the window. She wouldn't have it. She jumped on the chair and shoved her head between the curtains of the window by the front door and continued. My husband woke up and instantly went into protective man of the house mode. He grabbed the crowbar from the floor beside him, walked over to the window and looked out to see what she was barking at, telling me to stay behind him. When all he saw was the neighbours, he got a little irritated. He'd been as stressed as I was since the whole police incident and was finally getting some decent rest. Still, despite what it may have appeared to be, I told him maybe we should call the police again. Seeing Penny that way left me uneasy. The whole situation just seemed off. At first he was reluctant, saying they wouldn't do anything if nothing had happened. As he said this, he went paper white and his eyes burned into the picture window in the kitchen behind me. I turned around and saw 3 figures climbing over the fence into the alleyway, out of our yard. I immediately called the cops again and my husband tore out of the back door while I begged him to stay inside. I didn't know if those guys had guns or what, while all he had was the crowbar. The police were there in seconds, it seemed. Fast for them, to be honest, around here. Luckily, they caught up with all 3 guys who ratted out my neighbours across the street. Apparently, according to the officer we spoke to, these people had warrants out for their arrest on multiple offences. One was wanted for possession of drugs with the intent to sell. 2 of the other guys had outstanding warrants for assault, while the girl that lived with them was wanted in the next state over for armed robbery. It was a goddamn den of criminals. Apparently they'd been watching us as well as our neighbours to the left and right, figuring out our schedules for when things go quiet or when we are at work, trying to find a good time to break in and steal any valuables. Yesterday I spoke with a neighbour on the left. She's a very nice lady. She's lived next to my family for the past 14 years. She told me she thought she heard someone breaking into her home a couple of weeks prior and immediately installed a security system. I can't help but think this must have deterred them from her, so they moved on to try and rob us. Our other neighbour hasn't had any trouble, which kind of makes me nervous when I think about it. It's been quiet since, though. The house across the street was pretty much searched and the rental company emptied it out this morning. It's eerily dark over there. While I have always had a weird fear of open windows at night, I'm kind of grateful I forgot to close the curtains that first night. If I hadn't seen that first guy in the backyard, maybe I wouldn't have tried to crawl to the kitchen door and noticed the one at my front door. If we had closed the curtains on the night they all got caught, maybe my husband wouldn't have seen them all in the backyard then either. Either way, I'm just glad it's all over and that no one was hurt in the end. I feel a lot safer now. Maybe I'll finally be able to get some sleep. Everybody has a demon. Most people just don't know it. I do. I can see them. They perch on your shoulders or ride piggyback whispering in your ear. Sometimes they speak words soothing and sickly sweet, other times bitter and venomous. Some people's demons are tiny and innocuous, even cute. Others are brutes, stupid, foul, slovenly. Some are, in a word, abominations. Twisted, malevolent perversions who revel in misery and suffering. Those are the worst kind. You can tell a lot about a person by looking at their demon. My demon's name is Jack. Well, that's what I call him anyway. They never tell you their real names, and that's okay by me. Jack fits him just fine. I've known Jack for as long as I can remember, my whole life actually. He's always been around. When I was lonely, Jack would play with me. When I was sad, Jack would crack jokes to make me laugh. When I was bored, Jack would tell stories. Jack always knew the right things to say. When I was young, I thought my parents could see him too. They called Jack my imaginary friend, and my mother would tell the other mums about how creative her son Kevin is. He has such a vivid imagination. Sometimes they would ask me questions about Jack, or they would ask him questions about me. He would always answer, but I began to notice something strange. They never seemed to react quite right. It was like they weren't actually hearing him. They'd become smug and condescending and say things like, "I think Jack is telling you to finish your green beans, don't you think, honey?" I think they were ignoring Jack on purpose, and then I'd get frustrated and start to cry. I was just 9 when I finally figured it out. They really couldn't see him. They were just playing along. They were the ones pretending, not me. They were fools. I knew Jack was real as anyone else, so I'd talk about him all the time, to my parents, my teachers, the kids at school, to anyone who would listen. I tried to convince them that Jack was real. That's when it stopped being cute and my parents started to worry about me. Sometimes at night I'd lay in bed listening to them talking in the kitchen. My mother would get weepy and my father would speak quiet, soothing words like balm. He'd say things like, "It's just a phase, he'll grow out of it. All kids go through this. It just lasts longer for some." I'd lay there in bed with Jack by my side, comforting me. "Why can't they see you?" I'd ask. "You have a gift, a special gift." "They don't," Jack would say, smiling. Well, why don't they believe me? I'm their son. Why do they think I'd lie? That's just the way people are. You're very young, Kevin. You have oh so much to learn about the world. But I'll always be here for you, Kevin. You can count on me. I'll always be here for you. Around this time I started getting into trouble at school. The other kids would make fun of me when I talked about Jack. They called me Crazy Kevin and Baby Boy Kevy Wevy, and they would laugh and punch the air and tell me they were beating Jack up. They would taunt me and push me down, and when I tried to defend myself, I would get in trouble. Kids can be so cruel to one another, and the teachers weren't much better. They'd tell me, well, stop talking about your imaginary friend and the other kids will leave you alone. So I did. I wasn't a dumb kid. I knew they were making fun of me because I was different. They didn't have imaginary friends, and I did. And even though I knew Jack was real, no one else thought he was. Imaginary friends weren't supposed to be real. The unknown scared them. I scared them. So I stopped talking about Jack and stopped talking to Jack. I ignored him, pretended he wasn't real. Jack got angry. Sometimes at night he would knock things over or throw things around my room to get my attention. Sometimes he'd break things in my house and I'd get blamed. Even worse, he started appearing in my dreams, tying me up and torturing me in strange primitive rituals, chanting and carving esoteric symbols in my flesh. I'd wake in a cold sweat, mind reeling. Jack would be hovering above my bed, quietly watching as I slept. Finally, when I couldn't stand the torment any more, I started talking to him again, in whispers and only late at night while the rest of the house slept. I explained the situation to him about my parents, my teachers, the kids at school. When I told him, he smiled. He understood. Jack always understood. He told me that everybody has a demon just like me. They just can't see it. They don't know it exists. He told me I was special, that I had a gift. I was still doubtful, but Jack wasn't upset. He told me that I was so special that he was going to give me another gift just to prove it. Then he disappeared. For the first time in my life I was alone. I felt so scared, abandoned, and utterly alone. I was miserable. A week passed and still no Jack. Was this how regular people lived out their lives? So lonely all the time? How did they stand it? Then I awoke one night and he was there standing over my bed like he'd never left. I was so happy. "Where did you go, Jack?" I asked. "To get your gift, of course." "But where is it?" "You already have it," Jack answered. "But where? You didn't give me anything." "Shh. Quiet, child. It will all make sense in the morning. Go to sleep now, Kevin. Go to sleep, child." He sang me a lullaby in some ancient tongue as I drifted off. I awoke the next morning as excited as a kid on Christmas, ready to run out of my bedroom and see my new gift. But Jack grabbed me by the arm and spoke to me sternly. "You must make a promise to me, Kevin. Whatever you see out there, you must promise never to tell anyone about it. You must never speak of it. Otherwise your gift will disappear. Otherwise I will disappear." I promised. "Promise me 3 times, Jack said. So I did. "You've promised me thrice, never to speak of what you see. Do not forget your promise, Kevin." We walked into the kitchen and I stopped dead in my tracks. There at the breakfast table sat my mother and father. On each of their shoulders perched a demon. On my mother's sat a large puffy creature, a mix between a bunny rabbit and a giant marshmallow, but with huge doughy eyes and long silver fangs. On my father's sat a long skinny worm-like creature with hollow eyes and the face of a bat. It was blue and translucent like ice. A cold steam rose from its body. Its tail was coiled around my father's neck. I yelped in surprise, and 8 eyes turned towards me, 4 human and 4 demonic. I made some excuse to my parents which calmed them down, but the demons stared at me wide-eyed. At first I thought they were angry, but then I recognized that they were actually afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid that I could see them. The bat snake hissed something I couldn't understand, but Jack barked back in a gruff, guttural language which echoed in our tiny kitchen. My parents' demons cowered before him submissively. From that day forward I saw them everywhere I went. It was scary, to be sure, but at least I knew I wasn't the only one. Everybody has a demon. Still, it could be overwhelming. There were so many, and they all knew that I knew. They would say things to me, horrible things. They would brag about all the twisted, perverted acts they had convinced their people to commit. They would tell me about their people's evil thoughts and dark secrets. The demons delighted in recounting these tales in graphic detail. Sometimes Jack would stop them, but sometimes he wouldn't, or even worse, he couldn't. Some of them were scarier than Jack, stronger than Jack, and there was nothing he could do. Sometimes I would catch an evil glint in Jack's eyes, and I could tell that he was enjoying hearing about all the wicked and foul deeds other demons had convinced their people to do. He almost seemed jealous. It became too much. I had to make some changes. I would walk to school instead of riding the bus. I began avoiding crowds and started spending my free time alone in my room or out hiking in the woods, but it was no use. I started falling behind at school. It was impossible to concentrate in class with all those demons glaring at me, whispering to me, laughing at me. I told Jack about this, but he shrugged it off. He reminded me that this was a gift, that I was special. He promised me that one day I would be glad I had it. I trusted him. Jack was always there for me. Jack always took care of me. Sometimes I felt afraid. I could always tell who the really bad people were by the size and nastiness of their demon. I could see all the liars, the adulterers, the rapists, the murderers and the child molesters. They walked the streets mingling in secret with the good people and the normal people, like wolves among sheep, and nobody knew but me. You'd be surprised just how many of them there are, and there was nothing I could do about it. At least not yet. That changed in the 10th grade when I met Elijah. Elijah was a bully, and he didn't try to hide it. He was a fat, ugly, hulking slab of a boy. He was stupid too, book stupid, or willfully ignorant at the very least, but when it came to bullying he was a genius. He had an uncanny ability to find a person's greatest joy in life and turn it against them. He seemed to make it his personal mission to torment the smaller, smarter, weaker, and more introverted kids, of which I was one. He also had one of the nastiest demons I've ever seen. It was a massive, hippopotamus-looking beast with twisted horns and breath like the grave. It lay across his shoulders, making Elijah slouch when he walked. The popular kids ignored most of us, but they despised Elijah. In his mind, that was our fault, and he made sure that we paid for it. He loved to trip kids in the hallway, knock their books out of their hands, snap girls' bras, fire spitballs in class, and generally make our lives a living hell. Elijah's speciality was stealing lunches. I never once saw him buy a lunch or bring his own. He'd simply go from table to table taking what he wanted from the nerds. He always made sure to take my milk. I don't even think he liked it, but he knew that I liked it, so he'd take it, chug it down, and throw the empty carton in my face, laughing all the while. Jack started whispering things to me, telling me what a horrible person Elijah was, telling me all the nasty things he did when he was alone, telling me how he revelled in torturing and killing people's pets out in the woods, telling me about the things he would do to his little sister late at night, telling me all the horrible things he would do in the future, telling me that if Elijah died, no one would miss him. I tried to ignore him, but the longer it went on, the more sense Jack seemed to make. The final straw came one day when Elijah caught me alone in the bathroom. I was standing at the urinal peeing when I heard the door open and heavy footsteps came in from behind. "Oh, look at this. It's Whittle Crazy Kevy Wevy having a Whittle pee-pee break," he sneered. His breath was hot on my neck like a foul breeze wafting from a garbage dump on a scorching summer day. I ignored him, trying to finish the task at hand as quickly as possible. "What's wrong, faggot? You deaf or something?" he asked. I continued ignoring him. Big mistake. He kicked me hard on the backpack, smashing my chest into the urinal and my face into the concrete wall. I saw stars and fell to the ground, my member still in hand, still urinating. "Oh, no, look at that. Whittle Kevy fell down and wet himself. Here, let me help you with that. I lay on the ground in a daze and heard pants and zipping somewhere above me. Then a warm, putrid stream was pouring over my backpack and down my legs, and Elijah was laughing. I covered my head and pretended I was somewhere else. When it was over, I heard the door slam shut, and from the hallway Elijah yelling, "Hey everybody, check it out! Crazy Kevin pissed himself." I looked up and there was my demon, Jack. He was staring at me with a smirk on his face. "Okay, you win. Tell me what I have to do." Jack's smile widened. "Easy," he said. "Switch to almond milk." For the next 2 weeks I packed my lunch with almond milk instead of my regular 2%. It tasted disgusting, but I hardly ever got to drink it anyways. Elijah stole it from me every single day without fail, and he really seemed to enjoy the taste. Then, one day after school, a knock came at my door. It was a stranger, dishevelled and wild-eyed, dressed in a cheap suit. His demon was a snake, red as venous blood, venom dripping from its maw. He didn't say a word, just handed me a crumpled paper bag and walked away. I opened the bag and pulled out a clear vial with a strip of masking tape on the side. On the masking tape, in clear black Sharpie marker, one single word was written: cyanide. Jack was grinning again. "Tastes like almond," he whispered. I mixed it into my milk for tomorrow's lunch, and the next day I ditched the empty vial in a dumpster on my way to school. A few minutes after drinking my milk, Elijah was convulsing on the floor. I sat and watched, casually munching on a taco. A few minutes after that, he was dead. I wasn't sad. I actually felt good. Better than I had in a long time. The cause of death was determined to be cerebral hypoxia, likely brought on by a stroke. Very few mourned his passing. I started missing more and more school, and a few months later I dropped out completely. Not that I felt guilty or thought that I might get caught. No way. I just had other more important work to do. I got a job in a rough part of the city working in a crummy old bookbinding factory. The work was monotonous but easy, and I soon saved up enough to buy a used car and rent a shitty studio apartment. I worked second shift at the factory, from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Most guys hated the hours, but I found them perfect for supporting my extracurricular activities, finding bad people and killing them. My demon helped me. Jack was a real natural when it came to this. He helped me track down people with particularly nasty demons, and he'd tell me all the vile things they had done. We stalked them like hunters, learning their patterns and routines. Then he'd tell me the best way to kill them and how to get away with it. And I always got away with it. Pimps, rapists, drug dealers, child molesters, human traffickers, I did them all. Sometimes I made it look like an accident, or a suicide, or a robbery gone wrong. I beat, stabbed, strangled, shot, and drowned. I even pushed one fat fucker on the third rail of the subway. He fried just like bacon, even smelled like it. Jack was always there for me, protecting me, making sure I got away with it. The best part was, I never felt bad about it. Every person I killed was a wretched excuse for a human being. They deserved it. I was making the world a better place. Some might even say I was a hero. My conscience was clear. I slept like a baby. Killing people became normal, fun even. It was my hobby, and damn was I good at it. Eventually I didn't even think about it anymore. I just did it, and that's when it all came unravelled. I was out on patrol one night, following the SUV of a mid-level drug dealer as he made his pickups. He must have seen me, because as we came to an intersection, he slowed down and waited until the light was just changing from yellow to red, then floored the gas pedal. I tried to follow, but I must have been a second too late because a black BMW going the other way smashed into the side of my car, T-boning me and sending me spinning through the intersection. My head must have slammed into the steering wheel because I briefly lost consciousness. When I came to, my ears were ringing and stars dancing before my eyes. Smoke drifted from the front of my car. Then I heard another noise, angry, screaming and cursing. The owner of the BMW was striding towards me, a mountain of a man, face red, fists clenched, arms swinging, spittle flying from his mouth as he screamed. I lurched from my seat to face him, blood pouring from the gash on my forehead. Straddling the man's shoulders was one of the most horrific demons I had ever seen. It was huge, round, pale white, and bloated like a corpse. Pus oozed from 1,000 sores covering its corpulent body. It had no arms or legs. Instead, its entire mass was one giant face consisting of 2 tiny beady black eyes, and one enormous gaping mouth filled with row upon row of razor-sharp teeth, a forked tongue slithering snake-like through its fangs, flitting through the air, searching for a victim. I felt bile raising from my throat and fought it down. As the man surged towards me, I felt my rage rise, and I found myself thinking about Elijah, about all the times he had teased me, tormented me, and humiliated me. I thought I heard a subtle whisper in my ear. Do it. My mind went blank. My vision went white around the edges. I felt like I was trapped behind my eyes, watching, unable to control what was happening. The man was close, screaming in my face. He meant to hurt me. I reached into my pocket. Then a flash of chrome in the streetlight, a hot torrent spraying me in the face. The man's eyes bulging with rage one moment, now rolling back into his skull, his body slumping to the ground, my knife buried in his throat. I looked to Jack for help, but he was laughing like a madman, and screeching something in that foul ancient language. Realization set in. I'd done this man, done him out in the open, at a city intersection under a streetlight with no planning or forethought, with no escape route and no plan for clean-up. I turned on Jack in a panic. Are you just going to stand there laughing? Help me. Tell me what to do. How do I fix this? He was howling now. This one was all you. I had nothing to do with it. The man you just killed was a politician, a city councilman. Perhaps no less of a criminal than the pimps and the gangbangers we normally kill, but this guy did it under the guise of a law and order. I didn't make you do this. You chose this. I could almost feel my face go white as a ghost and the world begin to spin around me. I was stumbling towards the car, trying not to vomit, when I heard the noise behind me, followed by the scream of a siren. A cascade of red and blue light reflected off the windows of my car and the shops around me. The cruiser peeled out from the gas station across the intersection and rushed towards me. I sat in the interrogation room for hours. Jack stood next to me, smirking as the detectives worked over me. It all came out. They found everything. Enough evidence in my car and my apartment to tie me to dozens of murders. They said it would be a miracle if I got life in prison. The DA would go for the death penalty on this one for sure. Then they were laughing, and their demons were laughing, and Jack was laughing too. My court-appointed lawyer was a mousy man with thick glasses and mustard stains on his suit jacket. His demon was a small, skittering cockroach with the sallow face of a dead baby. He did not seem optimistic about my chances. The only hope to avoid the death penalty, he said, was to claim guilty by insane or mentally ill. Have you ever felt like you weren't in control of your actions? Have you ever heard voices in your head telling you to do things? Someone speaking to you? God, the devil, or demons? I pondered that for a moment. Jack was smiling, but his stare was black. Don't forget your promise, he whispered. You swore to me. You swore 3 times never to tell anyone. I remember, I replied. But this is no gift. It's a curse, and I'm glad to be through with you. My lawyer looked confused. Who are you talking to? My demon, I said. Everybody has a demon. Most people just can't see them. My demon is named Jack, and yes, he tells me to do things. Now I'm alone. Jack is gone forever. I sit here in a straitjacket within these 4 padded walls, waiting for my pills, waiting to forget. I'll never see the sunshine again. Everybody has a demon. Everybody except me. Update. Some people are asking how this story was posted if the author is in a straitjacket. Perhaps I should have been more clear. He didn't actually write it, he dictated it. My name is George Orson, and I'm an orderly at the mental facility where Kevin is being held. Kevin is probably the most sane patient I've ever had, and it's a shame what the system has done to him. I actually support his work. He was making the world a better place, even if his means were a bit extreme. We've spoken of his demons at length, and I thought his story needed to be told. To that end, I snuck an audio recorder into the facility and allowed Kevin to record his story, then transcribed it and posted it here.